Welcome to another edition of Green is Good. This is the Houlihan Lokey edition of Green is Good, and we're here in beautiful New York City today, and we're so honored to have with us today Henry Charrabe. He's the president and CEO of RWL Water. Welcome to Green is Good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Henry, before we get talking about RWL Water and all the great things you're doing to make the world a better place, can you first share a little bit about your journey leading up to running this great company?
I was born and raised in Berlin, Germany.
Okay.
I came to the U.S. in '98, and soon thereafter, actually in 2001, I started working for Ambassador Ronald Lauder in a personal capacity, and then over the last 14 years in all sorts of different environments. And at one point in 2010, 2011, he said, Henry, I really want to get into the water space. Why don't we come up with a strategy and find a way that we can do well while doing good?
Wow. So RWL is for Ronald Lauder.
That's right.
Wow. So, and for our audience out there to learn more about RWL Water, please go to www.rwlwater.com, rwlwater.com. So, water is such a hot topic now, Henry. And, you know, I have a home in California, and our business is based out of California. But wherever you go, people are talking about it, whether it's what kind of water to drink or drought or on so many levels. What's going on now? Where do you fit in? Where does RWL see its value proposition to make the world a better place?
So that's a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
But to drill it down, I think RWL Water was created because in the late 1990s and early 2000s, you had an acquisition spree that created three giant water companies.
Okay.
GE Water,
okay.
Veolia, the world's largest, based out of France, and Siemens Water, now called Evoqua. And so what happened is they basically created a void in the middle market where we are focused. So projects between $5 to $50 million, where we are working worldwide to treat municipal as well as industrial clients' water, both on the freshwater and wastewater side. Wow. So we have a different approach, and I think globally speaking, we have a great footprint and one of the few companies that also offer project finance. So rather than the customer having to buy a $20, $30, $40 million plant outright on CapEx, we finance it and they can buy it over the use of the water over 20 years, like you would do with your car.
Or with a solar.
Or your mortgage.
Right.
And solar obviously is the idea behind the energy.
Right. So, you know, to share with our audience a little bit, what are some of the common misconceptions that are out there right now about water and the problems that are surrounding water?
So I think the biggest misconception is that we are waiting for this great breakthrough technology. I think all the technologies out there are available, are tested, proven. Of course, you can always enhance it, and the biggest problem here is energy efficiency. But we do not have to worry anymore about having to treat water. Any body of water anywhere in the world can be treated to drinking water standard. The problem is money. The problem is who's paying for it, how do you finance it, how do you make it available to those who have the least, and how do we make sure that we value that water and don't just deep well inject it into the ground or let it go to waste, but really reuse it.
So recently I was reading in California, which of course is under massive drought stress right now, down in San Diego, they're building this large desalination plant. Is that a solution for our water problem, or does that create other inefficiencies?
Well, I think desal is definitely a solution.
Okay.
It can be one of a spectrum of solutions, especially for areas, obviously, that have a drought like California, close to the coast. That's a great source of water if you know how to build it efficiently and make sure that, I think, rather than building one or two large plants, decentralized plants, so of a smaller size, make more sense, so you don't have to pump and use electricity to then get water from place A to place B. But we have come up with smaller packaged water treatment plants that allow you to be close to the customer, so you don't spend more money and more energy just pumping it through a sometimes very old network.
So you're up against big boys, Siemens, Veolia, GE, but you're going after the middle market. Share with our audience a little bit some of the type of projects that you focus on, and how can you create public-private collaborations that then can make their community, the world, a much more sustainable place.
Right. So I think we can separate between two: the municipal side with the public-private partnerships, and the industrial side. So the biggest project to date we have done is with Pacific Rurales Energy, the largest Latin American oil and gas producer in Colombia, where we're treating 500,000 barrels per day of produced water. That's about 80,000 cubic meters a day. and more than 90% of that we reuse for irrigation. So water that used to be just deep well injected, like we do in the US, we are reusing for irrigation purposes, which makes all the sense in the world, and I think we ought to do that everywhere.
Wow.
And that's just on an industrial side. Now, on the municipal side, the public-private partnerships, I think, are important, where municipalities and states and state governments get involved and basically guarantee an offtake, in which we then propose a solution. And all we want to make sure is that we have a guaranteed partner at the other side that makes sure that we get paid over 20 years. And I think that is very important, especially when you want to bring in private industry and don't have the money from the public side to invest. It's just to make sure that you have a guaranteed offtake for long term so that you or I would put our money to work.
Well, you know, when you wake up in the morning, what is your marketplace for RWL? I mean, it sounds like you can do projects here in the U.S., but the world is your marketplace, really.
Right.
So how do you approach that?
That's the focus that we have to.
Yeah.
Well, the U.S. is a great place, especially now on the back heel of the frac business and all the industrial expansion that we have, and the great economic situation that some areas of the country are in. From a municipal side, obviously, you know, we focus on Latin America and the Middle East. We have scarcity of water. You have sophisticated clients, you have money available, and a competitive landscape that I think is advantageous to us because we work in that middle market.
Go back to fracking here. Does fracking create opportunity for your company to come in and do reuse with that water?
We don't focus on fracking, but what fracking does create is it creates economic mobility. So, for example, Corpus Christi is the 10th fastest growing city in the United States right now. Because of the frac business, other industries, plastics, aluminum grow, they need water, they don't have water, there's a drought in the southwestern United States, they come to us.
Gotcha. How many other companies are like RWL, are chasing the middle market space, and how do you then differentiate yourself from those other competitors?
Well, first of all, I would say that we are always more customer focused, but I think globally speaking, we're the only company that really deals with the middle market. Obviously, the companies you mentioned earlier could compete, but they are likely going after the wastewater treatment plant of the city of Chicago, which we don't. But then you have regional players. You have players in Asia that are very strong in that mid-market, but regionally. Players in the Middle East that are very strong, but in that region. You have other US-based companies that are very strong, for example, in India. I think globally speaking, with the project finance and the suite of technologies that we offer, we're pretty unique.
Talk a little bit about your technologies. What would be the suite of technologies that you offer if I'm a municipality or if I'm an industrial potential client? Is there anything you can't offer? And how big is the range of opportunities when it comes to water reuse?
So I think in general we can offer everything because the systems integrate us. But our core are the 4 companies that we acquired. So an Israeli-based company that focuses on desalination and membrane technology for brackish water and desal. We have an Italian company that focuses on industrial wastewater, where they take out organic matter of industrial wastewater, like in slaughterhouses or breweries, and turn that into methane gas that becomes electricity. Or you have the domestic wastewater division here in the United States that focuses on sewage. When it comes to reuse, it all depends ultimately on price. I mean, economics is the key here. You have to make sure that whatever you offer the client, at the end of the day, saves them money and make sure that there's an economic value proposition then for them to recycle that or reuse that water.
When you talk about reuse water, you talked about one of your projects where it's going now to irrigation.
Yes.
What percentage of the projects that you're doing are reusing it and going back to irrigation? And what percentage are going back and actually going back to become drinking water?
Drinking water, very few, because there still seems to be an apprehension. But the water that we normally would use to irrigate, we can now use to drink. So it becomes a cycle in which if you used our water to irrigate, then you have more water to drink that most people feel more comfortable comes out of the faucet. But we have 2 projects in Cyprus, for example, 50,000 and 23,000 cubic meters a day, where our water comes directly from the Mediterranean Sea and goes into the Episcopi drinking water system.
And so is that considered a classic desalination deal?
Yes, sir.
And then, recently, about 3 or 4 months ago, Bill Gates was famous or infamously on the Jimmy Fallon show doing his poop water discussion. And I only bring that up, even though it's funny and cute. Really, your technology is such. We were talking off air before we sat down together. You can also reuse poop water. You have projects, you have the technology to do the same thing he's doing.
Absolutely. I think Bill Gates' attention to this problem and to make everybody aware is the right thing to do. However, as I said earlier, technology is there. We've built the largest packaged wastewater treatment plant for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Camp Victory in Iraq, where the U.S. Army's poop was recycled, if you will, and make sure that we leave the place in better shape than when we get there. So obviously, this technology is out there, and it always becomes the question of who's paying for it.
It's, talk a little bit about working with the Lauder family. Obviously, from your initials, RWL, I didn't know that's who you're working with. But then once that becomes known, how does that help you socialize your technology faster and get your technology out into the world to make the world a better place faster, being that you have investors and owners like the Lauders?
I think the biggest benefit for us is the credibility. And everybody knows that Ronald Lauder would not put his name to anything that is not accurate, we are not a fly-by organization, that we're not there long-term, and that we wouldn't offer technology that's not worthwhile.
Right.
So I think for a new company to have that credibility and that name behind us is tremendously helpful. Also, Mr. Lauder's involvement personally in speaking to heads of states or industrial leaders and promoting or help us, introduce us to certain projects is definitely a great advantage.
Henry, this is, and for our audience members that just joined us, we've got Henry Charrabé. He's the president and CEO of RWL Water. To learn more about RWL Water, go to rwwater.com, rwlwater.com. This is a relatively new company, and this issue is getting more and more publicity. What's the future look like for RWL Water, and what's your goals in the coming 2 to 3 years?
So we are about 4.5 years old, which in the water industry, if you look at our competition, is a nanosecond.
Right.
People have been around for 20, 50, and so on years. So for the next 2 to 3 years, we've now seen a very nice uptick in projects. People have come to know us. We, I think, create a great team and now have the capability to execute those projects. So I think the next 2 to 3 years actually are surprisingly positive, the way I see them. And then it depends on ultimately the sole shareholder, Mr. Lauder, exactly how he wants to continue to build this company. But I think the future is very bright.
How many employees do you have right now?
About 250 worldwide.
Worldwide. And you have offices here in Manhattan, and where else in the world right now?
So the 4 portfolio companies are in Mar del Plata, outside of Buenos Aires in Argentina, northern Israel, in Padova, which is by Venice in Italy, and in Minneapolis here in the US. And then we have sales offices in Dubai, soon Egypt, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico, and Sao Paulo.
Wow. Any last thoughts for our audience members before we sign off today with regards to the opportunities that exist? Although the news loves to report bad news, because bad news seems to sell more than good news. The good news is that companies like yours exist, technologies to face some of the biggest issues that we now have in water exists, and there's a lot of hope out there. Is that not true? Yeah,
I would say if we put our minds and our efforts to it, the technology is there to solve all the water and wastewater problems. It's important that we vote for officials who are happy to come up with water strategies beyond their cycle as politicians, so we can invest into projects that will maybe take 4, 5, 6, 7 years and don't look only to be re-elected next year. I think that's important, but that we certainly have the availability, the capability, and the access to solve all that if we have a strategy surrounding it.
That's great. Well, thank you for your time today. For our audience members out there, again, to learn more about RWL Water or to contact Henry, it's www.rwlwater.com. Henry, your company and you are an inspiring innovator, sustainability superstars, and truly living proof that green is good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.